You guys, we're going to have a testimony tonight. This is from Jared and Amanda Brown. They are great friends of ours, and we are excited to hear their story.
Hey, good evening, everyone. So my name is Jared Brown.
I'm Amanda.
And like Tim said, we came to Reengage 4 years ago in just a mess of a marriage. We were just struggling.
Well, you thought we were more of a mess than I did, because you wrote a lower number than I
Yeah,
did.
when we gave our ratings, I think I gave maybe a 6.
I'm pretty sure mine was a 9, but I was delusional.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking.
We had quite a few things to work on, but we really didn't know how to work through that first early part. But anyway, here we are 4 years later, and have the honor to share our testimony a couple of times a year. And we were talking about it on the way here. Just, when we begin to do these things and we want to glorify God through this story, we tend to get beat down in the days and the weeks leading up to it.
And it's like we always forget that we're going to get attacked, but it happens every time. And so then, it's always like a week out, and the stuff just starts happening, boom, 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 boom. And then the day of, stuff happens, but we made it. We're here.
Yeah, we're here. So happy to share this story with you guys tonight. So we have a few notes here in front of us, and we kind of want to go through those, but also at the same time, we've asked God to just kind of speak through us, and if He wants to redirect us, then that's His choice. So here we go. So I just wanted to start by talking about kind of growing up in a church. I know that some of you have grown up in a church, or maybe haven't grown up in a church. And from my experience, I attended a church as a kid, off and on. We were what they call the CEO family, Christmas, Easter, and other. And so we would attend church on occasion, but I didn't know what a relationship with God was like. And my parents nearly never took the time to explain that to me. So grew up in a small Pentecostal church down the road from our house, and some things that were happening there that I wasn't so sure of. I was kind of curious, but not a lot of clarity. So that's kind of how I view church as a young teen and a young adult.
And I had a similar experience. My family would go Christmas, Easter, other occasions whenever family was in town. Or my mom's dad was actually a pastor, but you wouldn't have known that by looking at our family and our church attendance. But so we didn't really go. It was just whenever something was going on at the church, if there was a picking going on, or if it was a vacation Bible school, or the families getting together. But I don't remember it being about God. I remember it being about, having a good time and being together. But other than that, we were not regular churchgoers.
So my struggle early on as a young teen was pornography, like so many young men and women experience, and so that was mine about 25 years ago, almost. The first time I was exposed to pornography, and I knew that first time I saw it that I knew something had changed in me. I knew there would be this desire to see this more and more, and so it was a little bit more difficult compared to what it is today, how accessible pornography is to everyone, and it's a struggle that a lot of people deal with. But that was kind of my first understanding that something wasn't right. I wouldn't classify it as sin at the time. I didn't understand what that was, but later on I would recognize that it was a sin. Moving forward just a little bit, at the age of 21, I decided to join the military and moved to North Carolina, and that's where I met Amanda.
I didn't have the same struggles growing up as Jared did, but I did have struggles with lying. I lied about absolutely everything. Far enough that, even in our notes, and I would say I was a pathological liar. And it's kind of evident now in our children, because I can kind of see where some of that has trickled down. So I can see how, as a child, that's something that's just kind of there, but even into adulthood, I just, it steamrolled into it. I lied about absolutely everything, including when we first met. Everybody always likes it when we share this, but we met, how many years ago now was that?
This next spring will be 15 years.
We met on hotornot.com, and we both said hot. That wasn't the lie. The lie was, I didn't lie about that part. You still are hot, honey. But I said that I loved golfing, which I did not. But that hooked him, and so he was like, let's go out. And so that led to getting married, and we got married inside of a church, but then we never stepped foot inside of a church after that. I just thought that was the right thing to do. It made my mom happy, so that's what we did. Before we got married, continuing years into our marriage, Jared deployed regularly. At first, he was deploying with the Air Force, and I think those were 4-month deployments at the time, which turned into he separated from the military, and he was deploying. It was about 2 months at a time after that. One time after deployment, surprise, I'm pregnant. And so we had Valen in 2008, and I did not know it at the time, but I was suffering severely with postpartum depression after Valen. I could not get out of bed. Valen was fed, and she was bathed and cared for, but other than that, there was really nothing else that I could do. It was a lot of laying around and not understanding what I was dealing with, but it was definitely postpartum depression.
So Amanda touched on the deployments. I was in the Air Force for a few years, and we got pregnant with Valen, our oldest, and then I started working for another defense company after I became a civilian, and I traveled actually even more as a civilian than I did when I was in the military. But when you face that separation, if you've ever been faced with that in your marriage, you realize that you definitely do take some things for granted, and you realize that when you have a bit of time apart. And so I experienced that as well, and I remember making these promises that when I get back from deployment, I'm gonna spend more time with you, and I'm gonna stop playing so much golf, and I'm gonna stop these hobbies, and just quit being so selfish. I'm gonna, be there for you more. And I think that I had those good intentions, but the problem was there was no follow-through. As soon as I came back from deployment, I quickly forgot about that separation that I just went through, and so things just generally never changed that much. I don't know that at this point in our marriage we understood. I know that we didn't understand some of the struggles that we were facing, but this is kind of the beginning of some of the distance that was forming and the disconnect that was forming between us. And so I remember this last part here. Sorry, our technology is. I talk about deploying, and I wasn't a Christian, and I'd say that I was not a believer. I definitely was not a believer at the time, but I remember selfishly, the only time I would ever think about God or pray would be when we would take off in an airplane to fly across the ocean. I was always kind of worried that something might happen to me or my family, so I prayed once every 2 months when I did that. So that's a stage of my life. That's the only kind of relationship that I had with God, and really it wasn't one at all.
It's so crazy thinking back to that now because, as any mom in the room can imagine, having your husband gone for 90 days at a time with 2 young kids. Well, 1 kid, but then another kid came. But it's incredibly difficult, and you already feel like you're doing everything, but then when your husband's in another country for 90 days, and there's no chance of them just popping up and saying, oh, got home early from work. And so it's just to think back on that and think what a difference it would have made if we would have known God in that time. But we didn't. Absolutely. And so that's how all these other behaviors and things crept in. And so the lying, again, it was, I'm fine, everything's fine, the kids are fine, I'm fine. It was only $50. It was only $100 that I spent. Knowing good and well he could have looked, but I just lied about it. Knowing good and well, he probably could have known that I didn't actually go to the gym when I said I was going to the gym, but I sure would go to the gym parking lot so I could show him that that's where I'm at. So that was another part of it. I had Valen. I was suffering with postpartum depression, which I didn't know that that's what that was. And so the weight was piling on. I was gaining weight left and right. I just could not stop. And But I lied about it. I lied about, well, there's something must be wrong with me. I don't know. I'm going to the gym. I'm not eating that entire bag of French fries when you walk out the door to deploy, but I was. And so then the best thing to do when you have gained so much weight and you're suffering with postpartum depression is get pregnant again. So that's what I did. And so we had Piper in 2010, and right away, the doctors knew something was going on. They knew something was up. They knew that she had an enlarged head at birth, and so right away she had to get ultrasounds of her brain and to see what was going on, and that led to 3.5 years of what's going on with our kid. But she has a genetic disorder called Soto syndrome, which affects a lot of things, but it's heartbreaking to not know what's going on with your child, to know that something's wrong, and then to find out that it's something that will never go away. It's just something she'll live with, and it's changed over the years, and some things are harder and some things are better, but I was angry. I was frustrated with myself. I was incredibly depressed. I was gaining more weight. I think you get to that point where you're thinking, okay, well, I've done these things and I've done these things, so it must be something that I've done that has caused this. There's something that I did during pregnancy. I gained too much weight, something. I'm responsible for my child's condition that she has. So finally I decided to get weight loss surgery. So I had gastric bypass back in 2011. So at that point, I was around 300 pounds, 310 I think was probably my heaviest, if I'm being honest. So I had gastric bypass, and then I thought, well, that's gonna fix everything. If I could just lose weight, I won't be depressed anymore, but that didn't happen.
So this whole period of time from the time I was 13 until that point in our life, probably early 2014, pornography had been something that was still pretty heavy in my life that I never fully explained to Amanda. I think we talked about it from time to time, and I would say that, that I kind of need this when I'm deployed. But
It's kind of unspoken, really.
yeah, it was kind of an agreement type thing that, well, just not when you're home. I don't want you looking at that. So I said, sure, no problem. No big deal. So I just decided I'd just lie about it and continue because.
I'll tell you that, but I'm not going to do that.
Right, because
Yeah.
if you understand what the addiction is like, it wasn't something that I was going to give up if I could have anything to do with it. So that was just one of the things going on in my life. Probably early stages of realizing that there were definitely times when I was abusing alcohol, and it would be probably years later before I really understood that. Deployments continued to happen for a period of about 6 years with L3 as a civilian, and then 2014 came around and a lot of changes happened in our life.
A lot. We're in 2014 now. Jared was deployed at the time, I think. And a friend of mine and we decided that our kids were driving us crazy and we needed a break. And so we were like, let's take them to Vacation Bible School. And so we found a church and we did that. And thankfully something happened. I went in the church and I felt something. And I thought, well, okay. And so I remember they did like an altar call, and I'm like, I want to get saved. I'll do it. And then it was nothing after that. There was nothing else happened. There was no discussion about it. Like I would go every once in a while to service on Sundays, or they had kid events, but Jared made it clear that he was not going to come with us. I mean, he's going to lay in the bed. He's not even going to get up out of the bed. We're going to go by ourselves. So Jared accepted a job in Texas, and the girls and I decided to stay behind so we could sell our house, because living in Fayetteville, North Carolina, it's a big military town, and it was really difficult to sell our house. It took us a really long time to sell our home. So we decided that we would stay behind, and he would come to Texas and start working. And so he left in August of 2014, and he moved out to Texas by himself. They put him up in a hotel, and the girls and I stayed behind. And then it was September of 2014, and my dad died by suicide. And I feel like a lot of people say, we never saw it coming, we never expected it, and we were blindsided. That was the last thing possible. I mean, I can't even imagine what you thought when I called to tell you what had happened, because it was just, my dad was the last person you would have thought that that's something that would happen, and it completely rocked my world.
Yeah, that was something I never had to deal with before. I never really had a death in the family to that point, so I didn't even know what to do when I got that phone call. When I did go back to North Carolina and just to be there for her and the family and try to just help out with some things. But when I came back, I just didn't know how to process it. He was a close friend, and so I was really broken about it. But I didn't know how to comfort Amanda or her mom. I was just kind of disconnected, and sometimes they didn't really feel like they wanted to talk about it, or I didn't know that they wanted to talk about it. So I just did what I knew to do, which was act like nothing had happened, just minimize it and talk about other things. So during that period before we sold our house and they moved to Texas, I was just kind of, alcohol became something that was another comfort to me but in addition to pornography. I was working, had a good career that was building, and I was focused on just enjoyment, just enjoying life and all the pleasures that came along with it.
Thinking back, 2008 is when I had Valen, so postpartum depression, weight gain, depressed about that, pregnancy again, with a child who has special needs. I mean, it was just like the depression never went away. It just morphed into new types of depression. And so at this point, okay, here's my dad, and he's gone. And it was just, it was a deep, deep depression that I fell into. We finally got to Texas in December of 2014, and we didn't talk about anything that was deep or serious or meaningful. It was all surface level, day to day, how to make it through, how to get the kids where they need to be, how to figure out what we're doing. I feel like I've told this story a million times, but it's just that one moment that sticks in your mind that you remember forever. But it was around Valentine's Day. Does that sound about right? And I didn't know how to talk to Jared about it, and so then it would come out as just, fits of crying and just bawling. And he came to me, and he was just like, "What's wrong with you?" And he was frustrated because he just didn't know how to deal with it, and I was just done. And I was like, okay, if that's how you're going to react to me being emotional, then I'm not going to be. I'm just going to stuff it down, and I'm not going to talk to you, and I'm going to hide everything. So that's what I decided to do in February, just stuff it down. In June, my mom's sister, who I was very close to, she died suddenly. And so then, my mom had followed us out to Texas. It was a big hit. My dad, then her sister, and it was just, the hits keep on coming. And just sinning left and right, like Jared says, the alcohol especially, just, it's hard to see it when you're in it, but we were completely dependent on alcohol to help us through anything that was happening. But it's crazy how Satan, slips things in. But one of the final straws was Jared ran over my dog, and it sounds so silly to say it, but that was one of those things where it's just one more thing, one more loss, one more hit. It's one more thing. It was in October, and it was early November, and Jared was on a trip to Florida, and I called him, and I said, I'm I've got my spot picked out in the backyard, and I'm ready to go, and I'm going to take my life. And I was ready. I was ready, but God was not ready, and he allowed Jared to intervene in that moment.
So I get this call from Amanda. I'm in Florida. Of course, this is how these things happen sometimes. I'm in Florida, can't do much, but she calls me. I could tell there was something going on for a day or two before it. I didn't want to go on the trip. I almost didn't get on my flight and go there because I just knew something was wrong. But so 2 days in Florida, she gives me a call and just kind of lets me know. She's like, I'm just done. I can't live anymore. And so I just paused for a second. My normal reaction would have been maybe like I said earlier, like what's wrong with you? But this time it was different. I just paused for a minute, and I don't remember exactly if I asked or if I prayed at that moment, but I know that I was like, I know that this is it. Like the next words out of my mouth are going to determine what our life looks like from this point forward. So somehow I responded in a caring, compassionate way that said, I'm sorry that you feel like this, and I just want to come home and to you, and I want to begin to just connect again. Distance has been forming. We need to do something different, so let me just come home right now. And so we talked for a few minutes on the phone, and so the plane was in place. I was going to run out of my hotel room and get on an airplane. So we got off the phone, and I fall down on the floor and pray for the first time in a long time. And I asked God to help me save Amanda. And I know we don't make bargains with God, but I know that he had grace that day because I asked him if he would just show me that he would get us through this and just give me this sign, please. And I know that this will be it for me. My life will be changed forever. And I told him I'm just going to turn my life around. So I get on the airplane, and I make it home. And I got home just later that night, and we just began to talk about the stuff that had been going on, both confessing to each other just our sins, and we're ready to move forward and repair our marriage.
And that started with a bag of chips and salsa. We were at my mom's house in Royce City, and we had a knock at the door, and there was a bag sitting out there, and we were like, we might as well. Why not? Let's give it a try. And from that moment, we came on a Saturday night, but we just turned our life over, and we surrendered everything to Christ that night. And we haven't looked back. We have, I feel like we've plugged in almost every way you can plug in. So we've just tried to really just dive in, and that started with Reengage. That was one of the very first things. We heard about it that night. We heard about Reengage, and we were just like, we got to go. We got to do that. If we don't fix this, we're not going to be able to do this thing. And it was necessary. We had to come immediately, and I feel like we did come probably the very next meeting.
Yeah, we probably just opened up the worship guide and saw something for Reengage, and we decided to come. Like everyone here, we went through
We had no idea what a godly marriage looked like. We had no idea what God said about marriage, what God wanted for marriage. We had never heard any of that.
Yeah, so it's obvious that God answers prayers. He answers prayers all the time. He answered prayers that we had. In moments of desperation, he came to the rescue. And so like I said from the beginning, this is 4 years later. Here we are 4 years later, and so back 4 years ago, we didn't know what our marriage would look like 6 months after that point. We didn't know what it would look like 4 months after that point.
And let me just say, that first 6 months of Reengage was brutal. It was so hard. I mean, I remember that homework, and we would go home, and we would fight, and we would cry, and we would stay up till 2 a.m., and it was like, I felt so drained. And we joke about it a lot, but I really don't know how the kids made it. Like, I don't know what they ate. I don't know how they got to school. I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything other than we were so committed, and God had placed it so heavily on our hearts that you have to work on this, because if you don't get this right, everything that comes after this is just not going to be as good. You have to get this part solid. And that's what Reengage did. It truly showed us. I mean, that book was like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we learned everything from that. I mean, it taught us everything about what we were supposed to do and how he wanted it for us.
And like we said, it started real early. You know, we came to church for the first time on a Saturday night, and 3 days later, or 4 days later, we were at Reengage. And so I think a week after that, we were saved. You know, we responded to the gospel presentation that Pastor Steve gave, and we became Christians. You know, we were baptized together. A couple years later, our daughters through Lake Point have become Christians, have been followers of Christ, and so it's so incredible what he did in what looked like the worst situation. He turned it around like only he can do. And so this is what I kind of wanted to end with is, we said 4 years ago, what would it look like? And 4 years later, what does it look like? And the truth is it's still hard. It's still something that you have to work at, because just because we finished Reengage and we had tools, would we decide to use them?
Right.
And would we remember what God tells us?
Would we remember to draw that circle around ourselves and work on that person? I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do those things. And I mean, 4 years later, we still have the same old arguments about some of the same old things. Sex, hello, that's always one of them that you think it's going to get easier. I mean, it has gotten easier. It has, but Reengage really gave us a great toolkit to pull from.
So hopefully we can offer encouragement to you, because I know in a room this size there's just all kinds of situations and scenarios, things that we haven't been through, and so we can't completely know your story, but God knows it, and I promise you that he will bring you through the things that you just can't imagine. In a few months or in a few years from now, you'll be able to look back and say that I cannot believe how God worked through this situation and where we are now. Just be faithful and know that he can do all things that we cannot. So thank you for listening to our testimony, and I pray this encouragement to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys. I don't know if you have heard of this website, hotornot.com. Yeehaw.
Yeah, that's going to be on the bottom of your
Yes.
screen if you need. No, we're just kidding. It's not on the bottom of your screen. Yeah. So.
I don't know about you, but some really good points that Amanda made that just stood out to me was when she was talking about how she was not going to open up in front of her husband again. And for me, that just brought up the thought of, are you a safe person for your spouse? If your spouse were to disclose something or share something with you, would you be a safe person for them? So that was a good nugget that I heard in there.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I heard was, as they're sharing their testimony, just all the things that they walked through. I mean, just almost everything. I mean, I wrote down depression, lies and deception, deployment, separation, medical issues, addictions, suicidal tendencies. These unbelievable where they were when they were at absolute rock bottom, and then just to watch what God did with them.
Right, and when they were in their storm, she said, instead of drawing closer to God, we withdrew. And that is very important, that we do not do that we do not go into isolation. We know that that is where, living in the darkness, sin can grow, and God is nowhere near there. So we need to make sure that we are building our community. We have people around us that are loving us where we are. We are fully known and fully loved with people in our community. So we do not have that tendency to go into isolation.
Yeah. And then I loved just watching God's redemption towards the end of their story. And I remember what Jared said. He said he just said a prayer when it seemed like everything was gone and no hope was there anymore. He just said, God, if you will save Amanda, If you will rescue her, I am ready to give up everything, whatever it takes. And what I thought was great about that was God answered that prayer, but Amanda and Jared both also kept their promise and changed. They said they both submitted to God. They submitted themselves to God. They disciplined themselves to just the things of God.
Yeah.
And now they're watching God do unbelievable miracles in their marriage.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love how Amanda said too, I'm called to let my husband lead. And coming to that place of knowing what your role is and that your husband cannot meet every need, but God can. And just having that discipline as a wife and as a follower of Jesus to learn more about him and grow and draw closer to him and allow your husband to lead. So there's just some good things in there. So we hope that you enjoyed that. And if you are new here with Reengage, you can email us at reengage@lakepoint.org, and you will get all of your information and details of your next step into the Reengage journey.
Hey, we're glad you're here. Thanks for joining us tonight.